Is Starfield going to be the biggest RPG ever? I mean, just looking at the grand scale of Starfield, it does look pretty huge, and when we break down all of the information that we know about it, it sounds pretty huge too. We already know that Starfield will feature over 250,000 lines of dialogue, which is pretty insane. This is more than Skyrim and Fallout 4 put together. Cyberpunk has roughly 100,000 lines of dialogue, just for comparison. So we can already see just from that Starfield's dialogue will at least be huge, which also indicates that there will be hundreds and hundreds of NPCs we can meet, conversations we can have, and people to interact with, and all of that normal good stuff, which of course is normal for a Bethesda game, but with this many lines of dialogue, it's still pretty insane. But on top of all of the dialogue, Bethesda have also confirmed that Starfield will have more handcrafted content than any previous Bethesda Game Studios game, meaning more handcrafted content than both Skyrim and Fallout 4, which of course were Bethesda's two last biggest games. So in short, yes, basically, there is a very good chance that Starfield could become the biggest and most replayable open world RPG ever. The replayability of Starfield already looks pretty insane, and assuming it's actually a good game like we're all hoping it is, you put mods on top of it, and we could honestly be playing Starfield for the next 10 years, just like we are with Skyrim. I mean, I played Skyrim for 11 hours the other day, and the game is over a decade old. But just looking at the 1,000 planets of Starfield, you may think, hey, this game actually looks kind of dead and empty. And honestly, if you haven't paid much attention to the casual news drops over the years from Bethesda and the Starfield team, I can honestly completely understand why you would think that. But with the 1,000 planets thing, I think it's important to note that Starfield is aiming to be somewhat realistic. Obviously not extremely realistic, that would be quite boring, we would just die anytime we try and do anything. But Starfield is set in a future that could kind of be possible in 300 or so years, and 1,000 planets is of course a big part of that, because if we look at real life, most planets are empty and boring, but they're still worth exploring, and that's where Starfield will shine. Yes, we will be travelling to planets to find nothing but resources, but what I think people are missing and somewhat overlooking is the more handcrafted content than any previous Bethesda Game Studios game news drop. Meaning, yeah, okay, most of these planets are going to be empty, but on the other side of the hand, Starfield is going to have more locations, NPCs, quests, and places to explore than say Skyrim or Fallout 4, which is pretty goddamn huge. I mean look, over the last 11 years, I have put 10,000 hours into Skyrim. I wish I was joking, since it released, and I'm seriously still finding new stuff on almost every single playthrough I do, so I can't even begin to imagine how much bigger this is going to be for Starfield if it truly does have more quest locations, NPCs, etc. than Skyrim and Fallout 4. But even more so, on top of all of that, I also really want to note that Will Shen, Starfield's lead quest designer, has confirmed that random encounters can happen anywhere, meaning any of these planets, so again there is still some stuff to do even on the empty planets. But even the main story looks pretty big, with Will Shen also confirming that the start of this questline is just us taking a tour through the settled systems, which we can imagine will take a while by itself, not including our own exploration and us going off to do side content during the main quest. But just going back to the replayability of Starfield, we have 4 main factions in the game: Constellation, the United Colonies, the Freestar Collective, and the Crimson Fleet. Now we can assume that each one of these factions has their own ending to the story, depending on who you side with. So that's at least 4 different endings to the main quest that we can choose from, each having their own missions to fit and change the story. So that already adds a ton of replayability to Starfield. But there's also a chance that we have more than just 4 endings. We may be able to complete the main quest on our own without any factions, which I am really hoping for. The artifacts may lead us to an ancient alien civilization that we can side with. Pure speculation of course, but it's still worth mentioning I think. And we haven't even considered DLC yet. Now I know, the game's not even out yet, and yes, I'm already thinking of DLC. Bethesda usually really shines in their DLCs. I think that Skyrim's Dawnguard and Fallout 4's Far Harbor are the 2 best things that Bethesda's done, but that of course is just a matter of opinion. But when we take the 40-ish hour main story of Starfield and add 3 or 6 DLCs on top of that, depending if Bethesda want to go the Skyrim or Fallout 4 route of doing DLCs, that's yet again just a ton of content for this game. Look, what I'm getting at is that Starfield will be filled with content, there's no doubt about that. We already have 4 cities to explore, all of which look pretty massive, and we know that New Atlantis is in fact the biggest city that Bethesda have ever created for one of their games. But we also know that there will be countless caves to explore, strange planets, satellite stations, outposts, labs. Even this footage here looks like a massive spaceship graveyard on Mars. And that's yet another thing that we still haven't taken into consideration: our solar system. We have gas giants in our solar system, and other planets that we would straight up die if we tried to enter. So surely we're going to be able to figure out a way to explore them in Starfield, right? But even more so, this is the longest Bethesda have ever spent working on a game. Now, most of the reason why is because Bethesda had to get Creation Engine 2, their new game engine, working. Todd Howard did state in an interview a while ago that it took longer than expected, and that's sort of why Starfield was basically taking forever. But while that was the main reason, there are still others, such as the game having so much more to do than what Bethesda would usually add into their games. Look, my whole point here is that, we keep seeing people claim that Starfield won't have any content and will be empty and boring, and I just don't think that that will be the case. I think this could genuinely be one of the biggest open world RPGs ever. That's just the conclusion that I've eventually come to after all of these little trailers here and there. I mean, Starfield is already blowing me away with some of the stuff that they're doing with it, and it's not even out yet. The various pieces of news over the years, like when you add it all up, it definitely looks and sounds like a gigantic game. And of course, look, I could always be wrong. Starfield could turn out to be pure dong water, filled with nothing to do, aimless quests, boring planets, NPCs, etc, etc, etc. But I just really don't think that that will be the case. Starfield is ambitious. I mean, I can't think of a single other game with over 1,000 planets to explore, whether they're empty or not. And look, people play Bethesda games for thousands of hours, myself included. I mean, I have 8,000 hours on Fallout 4, and it's only my 4th favourite Fallout game. I mean, Jesus, I'll probably spend a few hundred hours building outposts in Starfield alone, but then you add ship building on top of that? Yeah, I have basically zero doubt now that Starfield will quickly rise to the top of my most played game list, and honestly, I can't wait. But that is pretty much everything I wanted to go over, so let me know in the comments below what you think you'll spend the most amount of time doing in Starfield. Honestly, I'll probably spend like 5 hours creating my character alone. Please do drop the video a like for me if you haven't already, it really does help out a ton, and if you're new around here and you're looking for a place to stay up to date on Starfield news, leaks, breakdowns, speculation, discussions, and so much other Bethesda focused content from Elder Scrolls to Fallout, I've got you covered, so consider subscribing, I'd really appreciate your support. And lastly, as always, a massive shout out to our channel members. You guys absolutely rock, you're amazing, I could not do this job without you. Thank you so much for your continued support. But with all of that said and done, thank you all so much for watching, and I really hope to see you next time. Peace.